And so Mike here is a recent PhD student, PhD graduate as of 2017, who went on to fulfilling an international career and then came back to Ottawa. He's now working with Fisheries and Oceans Canada on the Canada Ocean Accounts pilot and engaging with uOttawa students and faculty as an adjunct prof for the geography department. Mike, I'll let you take it away from me.
Right, thanks for the introduction there, Kathra, and thanks to everybody for joining. Je vais parler en anglais. I need to work on my French skills. Anyway, so here is my introduction slide. You can see the whole slide there. So, what have you heard about the ocean lately? It's becoming a big topic. I mentioned blue economy sorts of things, but it's becoming a more prevalent research topic. Scientists are looking at the carbon storage capacity of the ocean. We're finding out things about corals and seagrasses and mangroves. Ocean noise has become a big topic, that apparently we're creating these dead zones where animals just won't go because of the noise. And some researchers are looking at how to cut that noise down. Canada is starting a blue economy strategy. I'm linked in with Fisheries and Oceans. We're contributing to that. I mentioned when we were chatting before that a lot of blue economy is involved with exploiting the ocean rather than using the ocean sustainably. We're promoting more sustainable use of the ocean. And we understand that the ocean is intimately tied to climate issues. So I'll present this in four main stories. One is the story of statistics, and I'm really talking about official statistics. I worked at Statistics Canada for over 30 years. They have a rather unique perspective. They're truly special people. People work in statistics agencies. I don't know if you've seen the movie A Beautiful Mind, but we're kind of obsessed with numbers and getting the numbers right. And the reason for ocean accounts isn't really obvious unless you know a bit about what these statisticians do and how they work. And the second story is about environmental economic accounting. So this is an approach that's been developed by official statisticians. There's a real international statistical community I'll tell you a bit about, but in collaboration with subject matter experts. So environmental economic accounting is something that over 90 countries have at least piloted, and 40 or 50 countries are doing regularly. And the Ocean Accounts Framework puts together lots of ideas about the ocean into one coherent system of thought. I'll tell you a little bit about what we do. I talk about we, I'm part of several networks in the international community. And one focal point for me is the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership, of which I'm co-chair. I'll tell you a little bit about that. And they are making progress in collaboration on measuring the ocean. A couple of years ago, I'd suggested to the International Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, who declared this decade, it started in January, the Decade of Ocean Science. I suggested they call it the Decade of Ocean Science and Statistics. They didn't, but they are talking to us about providing a coherent framework. They understand that they really don't have a coherent framework, so they're talking to the Global Ocean Accounts people to provide that backup. In fact, I'm on an evaluation committee for the Decade of Ocean Science, so we'll see how that goes. So statistics. This is a slightly outdated picture of Statistics Canada. I thought I'd show something a little bit more historical. We don't really use hand calculators and things like that anymore, but there's a long history of statistics and the way statisticians think, which is very standardized, very structured, very slow, but sure. So I don't know if you've ever had to work with statisticians, ask them for something. One story is when you ask a statistician what they have, they ask you what you want, and that goes around in a circle. So very often it's difficult to get into a conversation with the statistician about what they could actually do for you. And one of my jobs at Statistics Canada was actually working with outside clients, saying, well, I understand what you're trying to do, and this is how what we have can help you do what you're going to do. So one person called me a Sherpa, kind of the guide around Statistics Canada. I visited over 40 statistics agencies in the world, believe it or not. And it's a little bit like walking onto a construction site. You see people doing surveys and accounts. It's a little bit like seeing carpenters, plumbers, and electricians. You know exactly what they do. And the reason for that is that they all follow the same manuals. We call these manuals international statistical standards. So there's one book put out by the United Nations about how to do the system of national accounts, and all countries do that. The same with environmental economic accounting. The effort goes into the manual, the training on that manual, and then we have a couple of hundred statistics agencies in the world using that manual. One thing they do at statistics agencies is the census. So they count all the people in the country every 10 years. But there are a lot of what we call non-census activities, social surveys that collect data on employment, health, expenditures, income, economic surveys. They do the same for businesses. There's a business register that tracks all businesses in the country. We need to do that to sample for the economic surveys and link back to taxes. I mentioned the system of national accounts. So that adds up all of the economic production in the country and calculates GDP, balance of payments, and other macroeconomic indicators. So you might wonder how environment statistics fits in. There's a fairly active economic statistics unit at Statistics Canada. It's been up as many as 50 people at some times. And I was obviously part of that group for many years. And other countries have statistics unit. I've advised on establishing environmental statistics units in many countries. I'll tell you a little bit about what Statistics Canada does. Since 1979, I think they've produced a compendium. A compendium is just a collection of statistics. It's called Human Activity and the Environment, and it's still put out every year. And it brings together data on energy, water, land, biodiversity, ecosystems, pollution, whatever can be linked to environment. And there's a manual for that. It's called the Framework for the Development of Environment Statistics, actually based on early designs of human activity in the environment. Now, I'd mentioned that all national statisticians are part of an international community. Last week, all heads of national statistical offices and heads of statistical offices in international agencies like UN Environment and the World Bank, they met virtually last week, and they make decisions about these standards. And one decision they made was that we'll start working on a manual for ocean accounts. That's fairly exciting because when we do so, there will be a manual that all these statistics agencies can point to saying, here we have guidance, we have an obligation to collect statistics about the ocean and bring them together. One of my rationales for ocean accounts was bringing the ocean into official statistics. I've used that phrase a few times. Up until a few years ago, official statisticians really had no exposure to the ocean. So Statistics Canada, they produce the compendia, they run special surveys like human activity, or sorry, households and the environment, and they fill data gaps or address some national priorities. So one thing we did with households and the environment a few years ago was to add questions on household use of wood for fuel wood. And this is because Environment and Climate Change Canada needed some estimate of how much greenhouse gas was generated by households burning fuel wood. So we could give them that estimate. This all started, and sorry, they do a lot of mapping, overlaying economic, social, and environmental data. So we produced the first maps of population by ecozone or by drainage basin. And in 1998, you might not remember, but there was a big ice storm. And within a few weeks, Statistics Canada produced a publication on the impacts of that ice storm by overlaying the area of the ice storm on the socioeconomic information we had on the agriculture, population, and infrastructure information that we had. And they do accounts. Accounts, when I talk about accounts, that's a little bit like national accounts, economic, but that just looks at economic data. We also do environment accounts, which bring together data on energy, water, ecosystems, and other things. And we have a manual for that called the System of Environmental Economic Accounting. So just to give you a flavor of what goes into an environment account, I'll give you a quick rundown of an energy account. And it's much simpler than an ocean account, but it's a good example. And we need to know things like how much energy do we have, what's the stock, how much is consumed by households and businesses, what do they consume it for, where does it come from, how much does it cost? We have all kinds of broad questions. What sectors are the most intensive? But to do this, we need to solve many problems. We need to deal with many jurisdictions, government departments, each have their own standards. And by standards, I mean concepts, classifications, and definitions. Energy is stored in many forms. To know the stock, we need to convert estimated volumes into energy units. So we convert almost everything to joules, so we can work in one unit. This is one principle of an account. There are many types of energy. Again, we need to convert these volumes into energy units so that we can add them and compare them. The energy gets transformed, it gets imported, exported, transported. We need to track that, as well as the flows, the emissions to air and greenhouse gases, and the losses on land and water. We usually deal with energy consumption in terms of activities. So we think about transportation and heating and cooling. But if we want to look at the efficiencies of those activities, we need to convert that to sectors. So we do what we call bridge tables. We need to estimate how much of each sector is in each activity, and we can convert that to sector. So we can convert all that to a total energy consumption for the country and look at which sectors are using the most, which are the most efficient, which are the least efficient. And again, looking at the implications of that for greenhouse gas emissions, and including the consumption side. So we can actually calculate why the energy is being consumed. And in fact, most of it's being consumed to produce our goods and services rather than just blandly being consumed by power manufacturers and power companies and manufacturers. So I propose that this is sufficiently complex that nobody but a dedicated statistician would want to deal with the whole thing. But we can apply the same principles to water, waste, ecosystems, and In fact, I've contributed to a new manual on ecosystems, SIA ecosystem accounting, which was also approved at last week's United Nations Statistical Commission. And we can ask some interesting questions about ecosystems. Has the area and condition changed over time? Where are the changes occurring? What are the benefits of the ecosystem services, and what are the costs of losing those ecosystem services? So, on to ocean accounts. How are we doing for time? I'm maybe 5 minutes out, but we started late. The idea of ocean accounts started when I was at ESCAP in Bangkok, and it all related to the Sustainable Development Goals. SDG 14 demanded a lot of new information, and as I said, the statistical agencies were asking us for some help in how they produce these statistics. So we come up with a framework for ocean accounting. The basis of that is knowing the ocean assets, and that's both ecosystem and non-ecosystem assets, knowing the extent and condition of those assets. And we borrow from the existing manuals to be able to do that and adapt that to the ocean. The manuals have classifications, have ways of measuring, have definitions. We use those to measure the ocean assets. Ocean services, both biotic, which we usually think of as ecosystem services, and abiotic, things like minerals and water and energy we get from the ocean. We bring those together. Again, those manuals provide us with some good guidance, but we need to expand on that to cover the entire ocean. Flows from the economy to the ocean is really about the pressures. What are people doing negatively to the ocean? There are emissions to water, there are solid wastes. It's a big topic right now, is ocean plastics. And to look at ocean plastics, we need to know where they're coming from and how they're getting into the ocean. There's a lot of focus on the ocean economy. Ocean economy satellite accounting is actually an activity where you look at how much the ocean is contributing to your economy. And we can contribute to that, and using the manuals of the System of National Accounts. But when we put together all of those manuals that we have, even if we adjust them and add to them a little bit, there's still nothing covering ocean governance. So how do we manage the ocean? What technology are we using? How much do we spend on managing the ocean? And who are the beneficiaries of the ocean resources, the ocean services? So that's about as much as I'm going to say about that framework. You're welcome to ask questions later. I'd like to tell you before closing a little bit about what we're doing. I mentioned the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership. We call it GOAP. Somebody said it wasn't a good idea to call it GOAP, but the acronym is good. We're getting a lot of regional acronyms. So Samoa has an ocean accounts pilot, which they're calling SOAP, S-O-A-P. So we'll think of a few more. It's related to the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy. Canada's a member. GOAP is an action coalition. This actually involves the high-level panel, means it's the heads of state. So 14 heads of state agreed a couple of months ago that their countries will do ocean accounts. The GOAP has had 2 global dialogues so far where we brought together over 100 statisticians, scientists, policy experts, again, to hammer out how we're going to measure the ocean, what are the priorities, which countries are going to do pilots. There's a virtual dialogue on April 20th, co-hosted by Fisheries and Oceans. You're welcome to register. It's open to everybody since it's online. With Fisheries and Oceans, I'm involved in a pilot with Statistics Canada where we're looking at improving the ocean economy statistics. We've already made some progress. We're integrating ocean ecosystem data. There's a special side project on seagrasses and eel grasses. I'm working on a bibliography of data and research, coding them to the framework. So I'm essentially coding which ecosystems they're talking about, which services they're talking about, which beneficiaries they're talking about. So you need to read through the paper and code some of the information into a template, but essentially it's creating a database where we can say where the research is, and where the research isn't. Again, a big part of this is identifying the gaps. There's an international community. I'm still part of the international community through the United Nations, where we're doing many pilots. So these countries, Australia, China, Malaysia, Samoa, Thailand, Vietnam, and others are being added to the list, have actually done pilot studies, a little microcosm of an ocean account, partly testing the framework. This United Nations Statistical Commission agreed to work together on a SIA ocean for 2023. I'm making some contributions to the Decade of Ocean Science, the Secretariat for the Convention on Biological Diversity on their global biodiversity framework. And there's enough interest that I'm being asked every week or so to do a presentation on ocean account. So glad to keep that interest going. So in conclusion, if you remember nothing about this presentation, you can take this home, that if we want to use the ocean sustainably, we'll need better information. Ocean accounting is a way to bring that information together from many sources and present it in a form that makes sense to decision makers and the public. And by doing so, we also identify gaps in that knowledge. The international community is working on a standard way of measuring ocean assets, ocean services, the ocean economy, and the pressures that people put on the ocean. And my hope is that maybe statisticians can help save the ocean. Thank you very much. That's the end. So I've left some references here. If you'd like, I could send you a copy of the presentation. My email was on the first slide there. You may have my email address from other places, but yeah, if you'd like to help, I'm ready to talk. We can talk about we can talk about research projects, how we can work together on this, how I can link you to other researchers working on the ocean. So I'm open to discussion. So
Amazing, thank you. So does anybody have any? Thanks, Mike. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions related to ocean accounting or any questions for Statistics Canada? I really enjoyed your presentation, actually. I laughed quite a bit when you were, there's some, yeah, it's good. Thank you.
I have a question, Mike.
Yeah.
To what extent is ocean accounting being used, currently in federal government planning? I just don't have a good sense of it. Is it at all used, or is it something you're pushing and there is resistance to, or how could you just tell us some context there?
Yeah. Well, my friends at Fisheries and Oceans, there's an economic statistics and data unit that I work with. It used to be the statistics unit of Fisheries and Oceans. And they've never been well connected to the science, what they call the science people. And it's the science people who do marine spatial planning and the designation of marine protected areas. We've been trying to meet those people and get those people involved. So the pilot that we've done so far has essentially not been with a lot of their guidance or input, but we've recently been asked to contribute to a publication which gives a case study of how ocean accounts can be used for marine spatial planning, and we are engaging them. So it's ocean accounting is just an idea that's so new that people haven't really grappled that it's possible and doable. It seems like, I think people who we've talked to might be thinking that it's, hey, it's a bunch of statisticians trying to take over what we do, but we're really trying to help them do what they do by providing them with more coherent information and linking that to international standards. And it's like, if you were working on a research project and you wanted to go and measure some ocean services, and you just decide to make up your own list and your own ecosystem types, and fine, that's fine for a piece of research. I'm sure you discover something useful and interesting. But if you can say this is this ecosystem type, we work with IUCN on their ecosystem classification. It's this service that I'm talking about. We work with the Common International Classification of Ecosystem Services. Then that work goes into context. I can put that work into a slot. So yeah, it's just a new idea. It's becoming popular in a few countries. The Global Ocean Accounts Partnership has over 15 members, and most of those members say they want to do ocean accounts. Sometimes it's only the statistics offices when they do these accounts, but we insist that they work together with their policy departments to say, okay, we're going to do this account to actually answer a question that we have, rather than just do the account for an abstract. But hopefully it's something that'll take off this year in Canada.
I have a question, Michael.
Yeah.
It's Michael.
Hi, Mike.
Yeah, so my accounting understanding is limited to high school accounting, you know, debit on the left, credit on the right. You're working with dollars, right? And you know, what you're doing is obviously way out of anything beyond my understanding, but how do you weight the different interests? It seems like you know, like let's say the conservationist interests in the ocean versus the economic interests, like the shipping industry. How would you weight? They must, or do you weight them in some way, or do you just transfer them all into a standardized dollar value?
Well, dollars is part of it, but in environmental economic accounting, especially ecosystem accounting, we try to keep the economic and non-economic services or measures separate. So there are some things where you can measure the value to the way we think of the economy in dollars. So we capture fish and the fish are sold on the market, and we can calculate the contribution of the ecosystem to the value of those fish. But we're talking about the fish poop and research there, that the value of the fish poop is really through reducing, you know, in carbon sequestration, and there's a social cost of measuring the cost of carbon. So not everything in ecosystem accounting boils down to dollars, but that's part of it to show what the trade-offs would be in making a change. So a lot of the way accounting is applied is we have this proposed change. We want to change the use of an ecosystem. We want to one big discussion now in the ocean is deep sea mining. So no, the benefits, they're always talking about the benefits. So they're going to, you know, make trillions of dollars in deep sea mining. But only now people are starting to talk about the costs and the ecosystems that'll be disturbed, right? So, and what are the long-term impacts of that? So accounting sets up a way of talking about not only the dollars, but having that other set of columns in terms of what the impacts would be on on ecosystem services that we can't measure in dollars.
So like, can you take does that mean you can take in forecasting into account, the future into account, in terms of how much, let's say, the ocean ecosystem integrity is worth to future generations when you're okay?
Yeah, that's something that statisticians, the real hardcore statisticians, are really uncomfortable with, because they don't do the economic forecasting. but built into ecosystem accounting is a way of looking at the future flow of services. And the better, monetary and non-monetary future flows of services, this is what we get under this scenario, and this is what we get under that scenario, and people would be better informed to make those trade-offs.
Okay, so Michael, I would like to follow up on. Can you hear me? It's a bit
Yeah.
Just follow up quickly on what Anna's actually started. When you spoke of statistics, you always use terms like tables, databases. And the moment you spoke about the people who don't want to talk to you, the scientists, you talked about spatial. And since this is the geography department, my question is, can you make environmental statistics so spatial that this other group would listen to you more easily, be more inclined to understand?
Well, the term marine spatial planning really means to allocate uses of a certain space. And yes, they also work with maps. And in fact, the accounting work that we're doing, even as part of our pilot, one person from Statistics Canada has been assigned to actually bringing together all this ecosystem information. So she's been going around to researchers from all over Canada and mapping seagrasses and eelgrasses, and so the new human activity in the environment will actually have some new maps. In fact, I would submit that ocean accounting, if it's done right, would be working more spatially, use more spatial information, use more geography principles than people traditionally doing marine spatial planning. You put a circle around an area and say, okay, well, we'll allow fishing there or we won't, sort of thing. Yeah. So there are great opportunities for the geography department to support this.
I think so. You go through all this work to code ecosystems in the literature. So you read and then you say, well, that's this ecozone, that's this type of ecosystem. If you actually display it as a real space, you get a completely different sense of data.
Yeah.
Technology is advancing.
Well, maybe that's one thing we can do with the bibliography of about 400 papers that I have so far, is actually make a map and say, well, we know this about this point, or about this bay, or about this this area. I think I just saw some maps coming out from Fisheries and Oceans talking about Canada's ecosystems, Canada's marine ecosystems, and we know there's not full data there. It's all kind of very broad brush, but there's a lot of work to do there.
I mean, for humans, you wouldn't do that. When you do urban planning, you don't put humans in human systems. You don't say that's the poor people. You actually use the actual map, right? Anyway, I stop. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we can work on that, but like I said, a lot of this is start with what's feasible, and coding the research and coding the data by places. What we get from the papers is the place name usually, and it would be a great idea to put that on a map. What it would show is what we don't know, right? It's I think Anders knows better than most that what we know about seagrasses is based on a few limited studies in limited areas, and a lot of assumptions about where seagrasses should grow. And a lot of what we know about ocean ecosystems is based on a lot of those assumptions rather than direct measurements.
Celeste, you had a question?
I did. Hi, Michael. I'm Celeste. I'm a second-year PhD candidate. Nice to meet you. I actually studied under Marc Saner. And from your presentation, I work in the co-management of salmon fisheries on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And my research basically looks at the people who have the local knowledge. So on the ground, bring everyone together to a round table and kind of suggest policy changes. And so we have scientists, sorry, to be more clear, we have scientists on the table as well. So I very much deal with this kind of bridging of knowledges between local knowledge, traditional knowledge, certain sects, and kind of making recommendations to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and then those recommendations being, you know, put into either openings and closures of fisheries. The facilitation group that works with us is called West Coast Aquatic. I wonder if, have you heard of that at all?
Only from your presentation a few weeks ago, I was there.
Oh, okay, great. So I don't have to do the run through then. On their website, they actually have a mapping project that they've been developing over the past 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that they worked closely with Kai Chan's lab, who did ecosystem services originally at UBC. So I think that I can send you the maps if you'd like. I don't know if they would help at all, but it is this like combination of local knowledges as well as scientific knowledges that came into producing them.
But a little story there is that I first met Kai Chan over 10 years ago, and he made a big joke of when I talked about standards, he would follow me around and say, concepts and classifications and methods, oh my. And what I said to him, you know, I love the work that he was doing with communities, but I said, you need a more standard framework. So he came up with a framework, which doesn't really link to kind of statistics in my way of thinking, but he did agree to sit on my thesis committee. So he was part of my thesis committee. But what I do suggest to any of these groups that are doing regional kind of analysis is to look at the frameworks to see if they can use the classifications and definitions, because then they have access to a whole body of information that the rest of the world is putting together. We created an inventory of global ocean data sets, over 100 data sets. You know, people say it's not always very good, but the international community, through anyway, NOAA, Food and Agriculture, World Health Organization, all these international, the UN, various components of the UN are collecting a lot of data through satellites and actual data collection. And it would be nice to see the local groups have access to this international data as well, or national data in terms of Canada. So yeah, please send me the links, and I'll take a look and forward them to the people I'm working with on the pilot.
Sure.
So we'll just take one question, Sarah.
Sure. So hi, I'm Sarah Newell. I'm a postdoc working with Eric and Sonia on Arctic research. And so sort of going off of Celeste's question, I was curious, when you're creating this manual and sort of these standardized ways of collecting this information, are there considerations for actually adding local knowledge to these data? Because often in my experience, you know, there's a lot of local knowledge that isn't published in sort of journal article form, that if you're making decisions based on data that's not captured, then that's going to really mess with those communities and can cause a lot of harm.
Well, my principle to doing environmental economic accounting, in my years at ESCAP, I helped over 25 countries actually start up their environmental economic accounts. I've been in some interesting places, including Afghanistan, Fiji, Samoa, Vanuatu, and I insist that they invite all their stakeholders, including the local communities that have that local knowledge. And I'm working between statistics offices, environment agencies, and it's a hard sell. I always look at like I said, local knowledge as a source of information. I try to get local experts involved in things, but anyway, it's something we definitely need to work on. It's yeah. So yeah, if you have any have any suggestions on how to improve that, I would love to have stakeholder groups that included all of the the broad all the broad interests sitting around one table. Anyway, are we?
I just have to say something very quickly, Kethra. It just strikes me as geography is really increasingly, or perhaps always has been, but I think increasingly a place for translation, where all these, source of info, we live in the information age. Our biggest challenge is to make things commensurable and understandable. I think that's increasingly our role is, go between. It's an important role.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Michael, for that presentation. That's awesome. Excuse me with my cat. So join us next week. We'll end this now, but join us next week for Michael Sawada, who will be talking about deep mapping. Mike, you're on here already. And just a reminder for all grad students that the Geography Student Conference will be held on May 7th. And the abstract submission deadline was actually extended on yesterday to the 21st. Okay, I'm gonna stop recording now.